This is the Ordinance Committee of the City Council. It is June 4th, 2024. This meeting is attended by Councilor Nicastro from Ward 4.
Good evening.
And Councilor-at-Large David Texera to my left, and Councilor Jack Lally from Ward 6 to my left. Madam Clerk, would you read number 1?
Item number 1, ordinance. An ordinance adopting a new section of the ordinances of the City of Brockton requiring solicitation of qualified consultants and proposed scopes of services and fee schedules for any board or commission that requires an independent outside consultant review for any project submitted by an applicant in which the payment of the fee for those consulting services are paid for by the applicant. Invited to attend, Jeffrey Thompson, Ward 5 Councilor, Rob May, Director of Economic Planning and Development, Michael Morris, Chief Procurement Officer, Megan Bridges, City Solicitor or her designee, Attorney James Burke, North Pearl Street, Brockton, Scott Faria, J.K. Holmgren Engineering, Pearl Street, Brockton.
Councilor Thompson, who is the sponsor of this particular item, is en route to his daughter's wedding and is unable to attend. I did exchange information with him. We do have guests here. My understanding is that the Law Department does not intend to or wish to weigh in on this particular measure. From the chair's standpoint, I think we should review it, but I'm hoping that it gets a favorable recommendation. And with that said, I don't know if Attorney Burke or Scott want to say anything or answer any questions. Please, gentlemen, welcome, step forward.
Again, happy to answer any questions if they have any. We certainly were able, thank you, to make a brief presentation at the last meeting. And I believe there was some concern about whether or not there was a statutory impingement from allowing this to go forward. And I believe since the Law Department has not made a determination that it wants to weigh in, there are none. I never knew of any, but it would have been interesting to find out. So what I think is a proposal that makes just an awful lot of sense. Developers, I think, will be extremely pleased. It is pro-business, it's pro-efficiency, and expedites the process. And so that there isn't any question or confusion, the planning board itself will select the individuals who are on the list. So you're not going to get involved in a situation where a particular consultant becomes pro-development. I mean, if they do, they won't be on the list anymore. So it just makes a lot of sense. And I greatly recommend or request that you recommend approval of the ordinance. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Anything to add?
I don't think, well, just one thing, Councilor Farwell, the process that Attorney Burke is talked about and Councilor Thompson had discussed, it's really the process that most cities and towns go through. They have a list of consultants that review the projects once we submit them, either to planning or conservation. We submit the application, they send it out to consultants, and typically they'll get a price from the consultant and a timeline. And then it's kind of kicked around and we get to decide which consultant we prefer to use. We might want to pay extra money if you're going to be faster, or pay less money even though you're going to be slow. So it just gives us a little bit of flexibility working on the development side of things, both in the price and the time that we get things done. Right now, the way it's done in Brockton, the way it's been done for a long time, there's just one firm that gets all of the reviews from the planning in the conservation department.
Councilor Lally?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really all I have to say was, my concern the last time around was over the process and over, whether or not we'd wind up with companies that were catering to developers for the hopes of increased business. But I did speak to Attorney Burke and I did speak to Councilor Thompson, and I do appreciate that, our control is over whether or not we certify somebody to bid. So knowing that we sort of set the line up like that, that makes me comfortable with this. And I'd be willing to motion to recommend this favorably if there isn't anyone else. But I'll withhold for now, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
All right.
Texera? Thank you. Good evening.
Castro.
Good evening. I have two concerns. Attorney Burke mentioned that it's clear that the planning board will select the consultant, but number 3 on the ordinance that's in front of me says the Board or Commission provides a scope of services and the proposed fee to the applicant who may in their sole discretion select one of the consultants to perform the required services. So I prefer that the planning board selects, but which one is it? Anyone want to weigh in?
Of course, the
For all of
question to Legislative Council, item number 3, and I realize people can read things differently. The Board or Commission would provide the scope of services and proposed fee schedule, and the applicant,
To the applicant.
who may, in its sole discretion, select one of the consultants, but the consultants would be from an approved list that Board or Commission has. Am I reading this correctly?
Correct. I thought what was proposed by Counselor Thompson was for the applicant to pick 3 from the list, and then the planning board to select the final, but
No, that wasn't what the intent was
wasn't
with
it.
Counselor Thompson. That I know.
Yeah.
We spent numerous discussions leading up to it.
Just to refresh our memory and for the public, this came about because I exchanged some text messages or emails originally with, I think, either Attorney Burke or Scott, and someone paid for an engineering study, but the city found it unacceptable, and they had their consultant basically look over the engineering study and charge twice as much as the original study itself, which I think is just not what we want to do in terms of attracting business to the city. Legislative Council, do you have a suggestion how we could clean up the language in item number 3 to reflect Councilor Nicastro's
Yeah.
concerns?
you would just change it to, instead of who, you would write, and said applicant may in its sole discretion, if that's what you're looking to have the applicant pick from the pool of parties.
All right, so would you read it as it would appear then?
It would read that the Board or Commission shall provide the proposed scope of services and proposed fee schedule to the applicant, and said applicant may, in its sole discretion, select one of the consultants to perform the required review services.
So add in the words "said applicant."
To strike out who and insert,
Yeah.
and said applicant.
Okay, so the applicant is choosing, but Attorney Berg said moments ago that the planning board selects.
They select the 3. They select who is available for selection by the applicant. You know, what concerns me, and I don't know where we're going with this, I'm missing it a little bit. So there's a particular firm that gets all the work right now. And I know at least 2 of the boards are very happy with that particular firm. So now the planning board gets to select. Can they select the highest price? And they select the same outfit? And do we have exactly the same problem we've had for the last 2 decades, 3 decades? I mean, it just makes no sense. Why are we here?
So in other words, the planning board will call it down to three contestants,
They will.
and then the applicant picks from among them.
Yeah, I
Yes.
think, yeah,
Okay.
to simplify, Councilor Castro, just, if you gave us a price of $10,000 and said you could do it in a week,
I'd be more.
and Councilor Farwell says $2,000, but it's going to take him 3 months, we might pay the extra money for you since you're going to be quicker. So it at least gives us a little flexibility, not only in the price, but also the time,
Right.
which, as you know, is, in most cases, even more important than the price, so.
Okay, I understand that, and that's fine. I think Attorney Resnick's language is fine. My second concern is, and this is kind of important to me, I think the applicant should have to pay the fee to the city, to the planning board, and I think the board pays the consultant directly, because I want the privity to be
Yeah.
between the planning board or the planning department
There's
and...
actually a statute that requires that to happen, and it allows you to collect money and hold the funds in a consultant statute.
Like an escrow,
And that's
yeah.
the way it works right now.
Yeah,
Right.
that's how we do it now.
But it doesn't say that.
The city of Brockton actually pays the bill.
Yes, and I want that to continue.
Makes
And that
sense
can
to
be
me.
kind of unclear from this because it says the applicant selects.
That statute is what I believe Director May was referring to
Yes.
on that state law. So it is applicable. But you can say nothing herein shall be interpreted to conflict with that statute.
I think that would be fine.
Add that as number 5.
Does anyone have a problem with that or concern? No. No? Okay, yes, I'd like that. Thank you, those were my concerns.
Counselor Texera, anything?
All set, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
I just think maybe there ought to be one sentence in here that a list of approved consultants would be furnished to the applicant. Is that what we want to do? In other words, give them a broad list of...
I think the language works, because functionally, we're going to submit an application. The application is going to identify a scope of services from the Planning Board or the Conservation Commission, from its agent. It will be, you push a button and it'll go out to 3 consultants with instructions to get back to us within 10 days with a price and a time schedule. They will then bring that into the Planning Board, who will present it to the applicant. And the way I'd like it to read, the applicant then makes the business decision based on what's in front of them. But they're deciding which one of the Planning Board's consultants to take.
All right, so not to belabor this, but just for my own edification, when a plan is, I won't say rejected, but if, let's take the Planning Board, they don't like what you've submitted. Do they send back to you their objections and say, we need these areas identified, or are we just going to get a scope of services that calls for an entirely new, broad and complete overview? In other words, I would hope that we would get back to you and tell you
Yeah,
what the...
I think the planning department would accept our application. In fact, I had a hearing tonight that got continued with the planning board, where the planning department reviewed the plan and said, we'd like you to continue the hearing because we have these issues that we'd like you to resolve before bringing it to the board as a whole. So I think there'd be some, I mean, the planning board has flexibility. We submit plans, they have 145 days to accept, to vote on a plan, request continuances. So I think they would look at it, make sure it's complete, make sure they're happy with it, and then send it off to the consultant.
Okay.
Counselor.
All right, may I suggest then that we have legislative counsel read item 3 as it should appear, and then someone can make a motion to substitute that reading as an amendment to strike what is here and substitute that in item number 3, so.
Yep, I'm just trying to find the general law reference, but I will fill that in. So if you were to amendment, it would be to strike number 3, where it says who, and insert in its place and said applicant, so that the language reads in item number 3, the Board or Commission shall provide the proposed scope of services and proposed fee schedule to the applicant, and said applicant may, in its sole discretion, select one of the consultants to perform the required review services. And there'd be an additional section, section 5, that states nothing in here shall conflict with Massachusetts General Law, chapter. And in a minute, I'll be able to get that reference for you, but it's the reference to the statute that says that the applicant pays the fee and the city has a certain fund for that.
Okay, that's fine.
So that would be, if someone wants to make the motion to amend, that would be the amendment.
So I make a motion to recommend favorably.
It would first be to amend.
Okay, to recommend favorably the amendment that we've just discussed.
Second.
All right, motion made and properly seconded. If no further discussion, all those in favor? All those opposed? It is a vote. Now we go to recommending favorably as amended.
Yes, so moved.
Second.
All All right, no further discussion. All those in favor of favorable recommendation as amended? All those opposed? It is a vote.
Thank the council for its
Thank
time.
you.
Thank you, councilors.
Thank you.
You two never had it so easy coming into City Hall.
I was waiting for the full support of Councilman Castro.
He holds his breath.
Next item, let me see.
Item number 2. Ordinance, an ordinance amending Chapter 23, Section 61-23-69 to increase the rate block quarterly usage fee for all sewer bills. Invited to attend, Moses Rodriguez, Counselor at Large, Mayor Robert Sullivan or his designee, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Patrick Hill, DPW Commissioner.
Good evening, Mr. President.
Good evening.
Good evening, councilors, Mr. Chairman. As you know, I submitted this item for appreciation here in the council because, as you know, the sewer system is running a serious deficit of around $3 million, and it's really up to us to come up with some sort of a solution to deal with the issue at hand, and thus the submission. I'm one of these councilors that look at what our poor taxpayers are paying, and as we keep increasing taxes and water and sewer and trash, but unfortunately, I myself and you folks sitting in front of us are also in the same situation where we have to pay the added taxes, the added sewer and water, because that's the obligations that we have as taxpayers in this community, to see to it that our enterprise funds are sovereign in a sense. So this is the submission. Again, it's here for us, for our mauling in the sense, to try to figure out exactly which way we were going to go with this, but we have to do something about it. It's not something that we can kind of put off. As you know, there's an order in the council to subsidize this enterprise account, that we must do this, but going forward, I don't think it's fair for us to continue to take city funding to put into enterprise accounts or to bail out enterprise accounts or any other revolving accounts that we possess here in the city. Those accounts are supposed to kind of pay for themselves. And it's not fair for us to use money that belongs to Peter to pay Paul. But at the same time, we owe it to the city, we owe it to the taxpayers, we owe it to everybody to see to it that we have a system that is self-sustaining. I know these rates haven't gone up in some time. We took care of the water, we took care of the rubbish not too long ago, but I think the sewer itself, we can't continue to come to the council asking for millions of dollars to bail this out. So that's why we're here.
Thank you. Any, Councilor Lally?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Mr. President, Mr. CFO, Mr. Commissioner. I think that, we definitely have had a couple of decades of, governments kicking the can down the road when it comes to utilities. And that leaves us in a, unfortunate position now. My question, I don't know if it's for Troy or for Pat, how much, let's say hypothetically that this is just past lock, stock, and barrel, what we have in front of us, how much would the average household see a difference? Like, what would the difference be per quarter to a single-family home and to anything else that you'd want to extrapolate?
So the average consumer, somebody that uses between 1,500 and 2,500 cubic feet of water, you're looking at, for the sewer side of it, about $24 a quarter. So about $9 a month.
24 a quarter.
Yeah.
And that's just based on usage. That's not like we danced around with the properties for trash. That's just based on
Correct.
Usage, no matter what your style of living is.
That's with an 18% increase across the board, yeah.
Okay. And so this year, sewer was funded, basically off of what you'd already had. It was you know, it wasn't able to fund itself based off of what it brought in from bills.
So this year, I think we'll be, at the end of this fiscal year, we're on track to balance out using retained earnings. However, there are no retained earnings projected for next year, which puts us in this situation with the steady increases that we've seen in sludge hauling and other contractual things. The costs have elevated to the point where there are no retained earnings to balance the rest of the budgets. Cost of energy has gone up significantly. The sewer plant uses a very large amount of power, you know, between $2.5 and $3 million a year worth of power. So, you know, between that and the debt service that we're up against, yeah, it puts us in a $3.5 million deficit.
Fair enough.
Sure.
And obviously, oh, sorry. Yeah.
If I might, just to complement what both the President and the Commissioner said, because they both were completely accurate in their statements, but just to further clarify, Counselor, because the revenues for this year are not sufficient to support the operation, Pat is correct. We are not only balancing the budget with all the $2 million of the retained earnings, but the 780-odd thousand that were left. There'll be an order before you before June 30th to ask you to transfer all of that to balance the budget. So I'm just highlighting in a starker reality what Pat and the Council President just said. So that is not a sustainable practice. No. Every year. The purpose of retained earnings is to have a savings account to address capital needs, not to balance the budget. So and we're moving further and further away from that each year. So for next year, there's nothing available to supplement the rate revenue to balance the budget. And so with the increase, the modest increase that Pat has proposed, it'll at least, the budget that you'll see before you when you get the budget books tomorrow reflects some adjustment. The final number obviously will be determined by the decision that you make. Sorry for jumping in, but I wanted to clarify that.
Well, thank you. Fair enough. Yeah, and that is something that, like with the water was in a similar situation. If it's got to be done, it's got to be done. And obviously, due diligence requires me to ask, is there any way that we can stagger this? So 24 a quarter, can we spread that over 1, 2, 3 years?
The 18%?
Yeah.
I mean, Council, I guess that's a decision that you guys are going to have to make if we decide.
What's it going to do to your budget, really, is the question.
Well, 18% is $3.5 million. If you want to stagger that over 3 years, it's, you know, 1.13, 1.14, whatever the math figures out to be, per 6%. So either I'll be 2 million, 2.5 million.
Sure.
If you go with a 6, 6, and 6. But that also doesn't include those 2 years that we are going to require increases next year as well. So, you know, we're just further kicking the can down the road, and I think Troy kind of hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's just not sustainable.
Yeah. Well, fair enough. Those are my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner Hill and President Moses. Commissioner Hill, when was the last time that we went up on the sewer rate?
On the actual rate structure,
Yes.
I know that we instituted those $15 service fees, both water and sewer. I think that was done in 2020. But the actual rate structure hasn't been adjusted since, I believe, 2008.
But we went up in 2020.
We went up substantially in 2008 because we had $100 million worth of improvements that were mandated by the EPA to fix down at the sewer plant. So.
And in 2020, we went up 15 and 15, 15 for the sewer and 15 for the
15
water.
for the water, 15 for the sewer. That amounts to about $1.5 million worth of revenue every year for each department.
So So that's $30 a quarter. If we go at 24, that will be about 3 point.
That'll give us 3.5 in that specific department, yes. And actually, the rate recommendation that came out of the study is almost 20%, it's 19.5. I guess the thought process behind that was that, like every year, we'll try to manage what we have, cut what we can cut during the year, and then try to roll those expenses and balance the budget at the end of the year. Certainly, we can't make any promises, things happen, but we were able to do that this year with a pretty significant deficit, so.
We need to do what we need to do. It's tough, especially for the taxpayer. We just went up on the trash. We will be going up on the sewer, maybe on the water, who knows? And how much more can we do for the taxpayer? Or how much more they can do for us? And we need to tighten our belt a little bit because enough is enough. I know we need to do what we need to do to balance the budget and to make sure that our city runs. But again, there's only so much that the taxpayer can take. And so if we go up 96 plus 80, that's 176 on 1 year. To some of us, it's $176. But to somebody that's on fixed income,
It's a lot of money.
it's a lot of money.
Understood.
It's a lot of money. I would, what my colleague Jack Lally said, if we can say like maybe instead of 24, can we do 6% like for the next 3 years?
I mean, we can, to get to a balanced budget, we at least need the 18% is what I would say. If, you guys decide that that's not favorable, then whatever we get, we'll try to manage with what we have. But I can almost promise you that some point next year, before the end of the fiscal year, I'll be back looking for money to balance the budget. And that's not because of inflated costs, that's just simply where we are. It's $6.2 million a year to run the sewer plant, it's $3.7 million a year to haul sludge out of there. We spend between $2.5 and $3 million in electricity. We have $8 million worth of debt service that happens every year. We're already at 18, 19 million, and we're only taking $20 million a year in, so. And I still have to run a department too, so.
Yeah, we get it. It's a tough decision, and especially for us that's elected to make those tough decisions. We get calls. Why are you going up on my tax? Why are we going up on the water? Why are you going up on the trash? But 2 years ago, we were swimming on we had a pool of money. What happened, Mr. CFO? We were just, it dry out quick, huh?
Well, decent point, and I will forever, for the rest of my days, regret saying that. That was specifically in reference to federal money that we had available, and we made a very sound decision to not dedicate any of that money to our operations. You see communities throughout Massachusetts, here on the South Shore, laying people off, seeking overrides because they used federal funds to balance their budgets. We didn't do that. But what we have done is use retained earnings to balance the enterprises, and it was a necessary, but as I mentioned a few minutes ago, not a sustainable practice. We also, as you know, used significant reserves to address the school deficit. So our margins are very, very tight right now, and the challenge is, the consequence of having enterprise funds that are insolvent is that we can't leave it at the end of the year with a negative balance. So we're required to have the general fund subsidize those enterprises if they run in a deficit. And we just don't have the reserves that we had before, or the free cash that we had before, because of the ongoing impacts of the school deficit. So remember that strategy that we employed, that you employed, to raise our local receipts by $10 million to address the school deficit, the ongoing impact of that is that that will reduce our free cash by significant amounts every year, because we won't be exceeding our revenue projections by millions and millions of dollars. Then, so the impact of that is it's less free cash that's available to address issues, including deficits in the enterprise fund. So all of these challenges are linked together. And so I agree wholeheartedly with the statement made by the council president. And I understand it's difficult, but the most sustainable practice is to have the enterprises be self-sufficient, because if they're not, the taxpayers are still footing the bill. It's just then drawing down from other services that the general fund should support.
Councilors, Mr. Chairman, through you, I just want to add something else, but the important thing is to remember we have other payers into this account or into this enterprise that are not from Brockton. We have some surrounding communities that benefit from our water and sewer, and it's just not fair to continue to ask the taxpayers to subsidize something that goes outside of the city. And we've got quite a few communities that utilize this fund, and it just wouldn't be fair to the taxpayers of Brockton to subsidize, you know, the Stonehills of the world, or the East Bridgewater or Whitman communities that do not share their tax dollars with us. So, but they use our sewer and water in some instances. I think it's only fair that we somehow charge them a fee, in the sense, to help that enterprise survive on its own without having to come back and ask the taxpayers to help us pay for it. And that's something that we ought to keep in mind as well. Because if it was just Brocktonians, it would be a different story. But we've got other communities utilizing the services of our water and sewer, but not contributing into it. And to go back to the taxpayers and say, we're going to hike in your taxes so we can utilize that money to subsidize this enterprise, it just does not make much sense. That's why I'm here, you know, again, against my will, in the sense, to talk about rate increases or tax increases, but at the same time, it just is not fair to the poor folks that are paying taxes in this community to continue to subsidize something that ratepayers should be taking care of.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Castro.
Thank you. Bouncing off what you said, Councilor Rodriguez, I'm giving you an attorney thing. You might not want it. But bouncing off what you said, I've spent a lot of time yesterday and today looking at all these issues. Commissioner Hill and I had a long discussion about this yesterday after the Central Plymouth County Water District meeting, emergency meeting. And I am very interested to explore, and I think Councilor Farr will touch on it more, what everyone pays us, the different towns, the different schools, the different apartment complexes located outside of the city for water, and are the rates that we're charging, are they fair in 2024? And what would be, if not, what is an increased rate that would be fair? Commissioner Hill.
So I can tell you that the three most recent IMAs that were negotiated, or the four most recent IMAs that were negotiated, that would be Avon, East Bridgewater, Abington, and Whitman, their most recent agreements. They're all on a percentage of flow basis. So whatever percentage of flow that is sent to the sewer plant annually, we do capture costs outside of what we bill them for the actual flow. And that would be for capital improvements at the sewer plant. There's a very defined list in those IMAs. So I would say that, you know, the way that it is done, and that's how it's done kind of, you know, around other municipalities, from what I understand anyway, that the percentage of flow model is the best way to capture it, and that's the model we've been using, so.
Well, and we also, as you and I occasionally discuss all these interesting things we talk about, we've been having an influx since last year of septic tank pumping companies coming over to our wastewater treatment plant to dump their goods. And are we charging enough for that? Should that come up? You set that rate, don't you, as commissioner?
I do, and it's higher, that rate is higher per gallon than it is anywhere around here.
Yes.
We are seeing a pretty significant influx, and
Still are?
Yep. We're seeing up to 50 trucks a month.
A month, wow.
So that is up substantially, not necessarily from last year, but in years prior. So all that money comes back into the enterprise as well. So all that revenue that's generated, sometimes it's $30,000, sometimes it's $40,000 a month, comes back to us and it's deposited directly into the general fund. So, not the general fund, into the enterprise fund, I'm sorry.
I've done a lot of reading about enterprise funds, and I think it's very important that ours self-sustain. I'm not looking to have a big pad in there that all kinds of expenses might be written out of, but just for the focus of sewer or water or trash, I feel our enterprise fund should be self-sustaining, and I think it protects the rest of the budget when we do that. So I don't oppose an increase, but the question is, what should the increase be? Should we instead be looking at all these other places where we put out services and think about and what is our ability to increase those fees in a fair fashion? And I feel like we should look at all of those before we should look to our ratepayers.
And we've had discussions, because we've had plenty of people approach us recently from other communities looking for capacity. Troy and I have kind of been talking about a fee that is instituted in a lot of other communities as opposed to like an assessment fee.
A hookup fee.
They do a mitigation, what's
Yes.
called a mitigation fee, and that mitigation fee deals a lot with infiltration.
Yes.
So a lot of I&I issues, and the model is based off of, a 4-to-1 or a 6-to-1 ratio, meaning if they want to send 100,000 gallons of sewer here, they would have to remove, 400,000 or 600,000 gallons worth of inflow and infiltration within the system. That's, I think, right now, the best way to approach it. The model that's used for the percentage of flow, that's what's used everywhere. I don't know that going back into this, because I'm certainly not an attorney, but those contracts were negotiated in good faith. I don't know what the reopener language is, if there is any in them, but certainly it's something that we can look at.
I think we have to look at it. We have to look to all sources and look to our taxpayers last. I really feel that. Yesterday, when we were talking, oh God, I lost my train of thought. I'll come back to it. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Councilor DeCastro. This report from CDM Smith, Commissioner, was rather interesting to me. And I don't know if I'm reading it correctly, so I'm going to try to ask you a couple of questions about it.
Sure.
And just focusing on sewer. I won't focus on water at this point. And in particular, I was looking at anticipated capital expenditures for sewer, and that is Table 9.
Yep.
Am I reading this correctly, that in 2026, we're going to have to do $30 million in sludge management improvements?
That's correct.
And in 2027, we're going to have to do $25 million more for our National Pollution Discharge Permit?
That's correct.
I thought we borrowed money about 3 years ago to address NPDES requirements. It might have been during 2020, 2021?
That was for the B&R project to remove nitrogen out of the
Okay.
effluent.
Yep.
That was a pilot program in, I guess, looking towards the future of what we felt as though the NPDES requirement was going to be for nitrogen.
All right, and are these capital, and then I notice you, in 2029, whoever is here, $25 million more for NPDES. Are these mandated? Do we have correspondence from the federal government saying you're going to have to spend $30 million in 2026?
So the $30 million on the sludge management project is based off of a cost estimate from a project that we've been looking at for many, many years. That is to eliminate hauling the biosolids out of the city of Brockton and treating them in-house. That is an approximate cost. We know that, just in the engineering world, I guess, in looking at this project and looking at a bunch of different separate technologies, that simply putting a dryer in is not going to be enough. Putting a dryer in is going to cost somewhere between $15 and $20 million. We know that there's going to have to be some follow-up secondary process. Certainly, we want to keep everybody kind of informed. We're getting ready to put an RFP out for that project for design. We will begin the design portion of it based on the theory that we'll be drying the sludge initially. All those, conversations will be had throughout the design process so we can keep everybody in the loop. But 3 years ago, that project was $35 million, and this is just an estimate.
But the rate increase that's requested is predicated upon these capital projects that you anticipate doing, correct?
Correct.
Right. So I asked the...
It's important to note, though, Councilor, too, that $30 million investment will also prevent the sewer from bleeding money hauling sludge, which right now is almost $4 million a year. So that it actually will pay for itself, if not reduce the budget.
Well, that's like me saying, gee, if I put in a new heating system in my house over the next 10 years, I'm going to benefit from it, but maybe I can't afford to put the heating system in. I mean, forgive me, but with everything that's gone on with the schools, and you know it pretty well, Mr. Claxon, to start throwing around, we're going to borrow $30 million 2 years from now, you can see why that...
Oh, understood. And certainly I don't have the authorization to borrow that money. Anything that would come from any kind of project, whether it be through SRF or whatever, would be in front of you for approval anyway.
I understand. So according to the city auditor, because I asked her for this information, to date, for fiscal year '24, we have collected from Abington, Whitman, and Stonehill College $2,274,157.18. So my question is, if we were to, and this goes back to how those intermunicipal agreements or these agreements with entities are worded, the rate increase goes through, what's the implication for these outside entities? Because that is not in this, that's not broken down in this presentation. This just talks about ratepayers.
Yeah, because the IMAs are all different. I don't think it would be plausible. What's broken down is the revenue that is generated from those IMAs, not necessarily the IMA language and how it's going to have an effect on the overall rate increase. But they do consider all in all, because the percentage of flow, which is where we see most of our flow come in from the sewer, right? The percentage of flow model, which is Whitman and Abington, our two biggest users. It's about 2 million gallons worth of sewer, give or take, a year. They do pay on a percentage of the total budget.
But if I don't see the IMA, how do I know the cost per 100 cubic feet?
It's not calculated like that. So I guess you would have to read through. I sent you guys all the IMAs. I was able to kind of dig them out.
And that is precisely what bothers me, because unfortunately, years ago, the city council gave a sweetheart deal to Stonehill College. Instead of having one flow meter or one reading of how many gallons per day or gallons per year were coming into our system, they allowed them to break them down by dormitories so they would pay at a lower block rate.
Correct.
Okay, well, and forgive me, but I want to know who these people, who these entities are. For example, the other, and this originally occurred when I was mayor in 1993, we signed an agreement with Walmart and Avon.
Yep.
And we have the Gables.
Yes.
And we have, let me see, there's several of them. I had them here, but...
And when it comes to the Gables, they've certainly... They pay a pretty extensive amount more than the average Brockton consumer. And I know that Stonehill, even though the 1 meter theory, having the block rate issue sounds like a great thing, but we're able to capture, because they're individually metered, $15 per service. And the flow rate with Stonehill, I believe, without looking at the IMA right now, is based off the top rate.
I guess my point is, before I vote on an increase, I want to know the provisions of those IMAs. I want to know if they're irrevocable. I want to know if they can be renegotiated. I want to make sure that this rate flow, that we are collecting at least what we're charging our average resident, and frankly, it should be more because they're outside the city. We're doing them a favor. It just irks me that, as Councilor Castro said, I just don't get a sense that we're all on even footing here. I think there have been some sweetheart deals made, and when I say sweetheart, I don't mean illegal, but unfavorable to the Brockton taxpayer. But until I read the agreements and find out exactly what we're charging and who's paying what, I don't know. So I'm kind of, out in Never Land, assuming that maybe things aren't right. Maybe they are all right, but until I read it, until I confirm it, I don't know. Now, we charge other fees for connecting into the water and sewer system. Why isn't that part of a rate increase? In other words, if it costs, I don't know what the permit is to tie into the sewer system. Let's say you build a house or
$400.
$400?
Yeah.
All right. Why isn't that part of the overall analysis of what we should be charging? Because it just seems to me if it was $400 years ago, that should be adjusted.
So those fees are, I think, in a separate part of the ordinance. There isn't a significant amount of homes that connect every year to make an adjustment that's really going to make a difference. Should they be adjusted? Absolutely. I'm not advocating that they don't. But, to go from, let's just say you went from 400 to 800, we might do 20 sewer services a year. So.
And I understand, but, every little bit helps.
No, I understand.
Let's take an apartment, the new apartment building on Montello Street, 94 apartments. What will it cost for a permit for that building to tie in?
So the premium assessment of the ability to hook in for sewer is $800 for a commercial property.
That's it?
That's it.
Well, and by the way, this isn't a criticism directed at you or Mr. Claxon, but when we do something like this, maybe it's just my nature. I need to know as much as I can because I have to feel comfortable justifying my vote. Living with myself, knowing that I've passed on costs to other people. And I just think we should look at this in a more holistic way, which is why I want to have that working group with you, Mr. Claxton, and with the commissioner and others to take a look at reasonable rates so that we generate revenue and we don't have this problem arising again. And I would favor what other communities do, and I would have a rate for 7/1/2024, 7/1/2025, 7/1/2026, so that we have some degree of certainty as to what the revenues will be. But I also think we should take advantage of the building boom that's going on with all of these apartments that are coming in. So.
Well, and you bring up a good example, Counselor, when you talk about the building over here that was just renovated. They don't have to pay a premium assessment. They're already hooked into sewer. The way the ordinance reads that they're already hooked into sewer, they don't, because they already have a sewer connection, we can't charge that fee.
And you're right, you have to follow the ordinances, but that flips over to us, that we should be doing the analysis that I think we owe the residents. We should be looking at all these agreements. We should be adjusting the ordinances and reflecting what you need to run the department and to meet the federal and state requirements. And I will tell you, colleagues, I would not be willing to favorably recommend this tonight. I would be willing to have another ordinance meeting in the very near future. I would like to have those intermunicipal agreements and have someone take a look at them and see if they're irrevocable. What are we collecting from the different entities? I just want to be fair, that's all. And I thank you for indulging me in my comments. Councilor Lally, did you want recognition?
I was going to offer a motion to postpone this item to a future ordinance committee meeting at the chair's discretion, with the understanding that we want, modernized, like the most up-to-date IMAs, and a determination on each one as to what happens when we adjust the rates. Does this go up automatically? Do we have to renegotiate it at a set time? If that makes sense, Madam Clerk.
And if, Councilor Lally, would you be willing to add in that, let's ask the commissioner to give us a summary of the fees we charge now for hookups for the various buildings, commercial, residential? I think we should take a look at that. Take a look at the whole picture.
All of it, yeah.
Yeah, the whole picture.
We will not leave you hanging, as they say, Commissioner, but
No.
can you understand why we?
No, absolutely. I mean, all those fees are in the ordinance, I think, anyway. But I'm happy to break them down and send them to you.
Yeah.
And I did send off, I took a little while to juggle around and find all the IMAs.
Thank you.
I had them all in one binder here. And when I moved over to Montauk, I still have not unpacked that binder yet. So I was able to dig them up in my Google Drive. I had scanned them some time ago. I kind of piecemealed them, and I sent them all to you guys today. So.
Thank you.
So basically every way sewer and water makes money.
Council President, any final comment? Are you comfortable with, since you're the sponsor of this, you comfortable with us taking a little bit of time to?
No, Mr. Chairman, I don't have a problem with that, but I just think that with all the goings of the state in the last few months that we've been going through in terms of making sure that we're taking care of the fees that need to be increased, be brought up to a certain level so that we can keep the state out of our business in the sense. My suggestion is that we try to do this sooner rather than later, come up with some sort of an answer to this so we don't leave these folks hanging, and then we don't create that situation where the state says, well, we asked you to do this because we did the trash because they asked us to do the trash. Now they're also looking at these rates that we should be charging rates so that we are, taking care of the business of the people of the city the way it should be taken care of, through appropriate fees, increase the rates where we need to increase to stay basically, sovereign in a sense as a community. So my recommendation is that we do this sooner rather than later because, as you know, we've got the summer session coming up after the budget. So we need to take care of this one way or the other as soon as we can because, as the commissioner said, it's just a matter of time before he comes back and asks for another handout from the taxpayers. Whereas the ratepayers aren't necessarily chipping in from these other communities as they should. So I also don't want the taxpayers of the community to pay for what the ratepayers should be paying from those other communities.
How unfortunate this didn't come in a few months ago.
We've been too busy doing the schoolwork, studying for our tests, and it hasn't been all that much fun on that end as well. But we got to do what we got to do. Again, as a taxpayer in this community, as a sewer and water payer in the community, I'm not happy that this is going up anywhere, but we got to be realistic and realize that, sometimes the 11 of us that sit up there, we're put in tough situations and making the tough choices on behalf of the people of this city, and we got to do it. None of us are happy to do it, but we got to do what we got to do to keep our city moving forward. And especially now with the eyes of the state on us, we got to be somewhat careful where we can generate funding. I think we as a body, we need to do that on our part as well. Thank you.
I make that motion I referenced earlier,
Second.
Mr. Chairman.
All right, motion made and seconded. If no further discussion, all in favor? All opposed? I will get together with all of you and schedule this as soon as we can, given our other
Thank you.
issues. Thank you. Madam Clerk.
Item number 3, ordinance, an ordinance amending Chapter 11, Section 11-144 to increase the maximum amusement device license. Invited to attend, Shirley Azak, Ward 7 Counselor, Jeffrey Charnell, Chairman, License Commission.
Good evening, councilors. So we are here before you. I'm here with Chairman Charnell from the License Commission. So what brought this on is a business in my ward, the Westgate Lanes, who applies, I believe, every year for licenses for their video arcades, was before the License Commission a few months ago, and we need to relook at this ordinance because it limits, I think they're exceeding the number of video arcade games that are allowed in the ordinance. So, and I really don't know why we have such a small number, but we're here before you to ask for an increase for, I believe we decided 200 video games as this is per business. And I believe the square footage, Attorney Resnick, I believe the square footage is 2,500 square feet?
25,000.
25,000, wow, square feet. So that's a huge establishment. So I think with an establishment of that size, we should be able to allow them to have a larger number of video games. So I don't know if you have any questions. There is where we are in a little bit of a time, kind of in a hurry to get this done for Westgate Lanes because they are up for renewal and they don't want to be in violation of the ordinance, but they have exceeded the number of video games that I believe they originally had, so.
The chair just has one question for you, or for Mr. Chanel, and I wasn't smart enough to think about this. Any objection, if it's written into the ordinance, that during days when school is in session, that a minor must be accompanied by a parent or legal guardian to play video games so that we don't have that become a magnet for people who are not in school?
I mean, I'm not really sure. I think that, I know, for example, Westgate Lanes, I don't believe they open until the afternoon. Most of the time, they're not open during the day when schools, I mean, they're not letting kids in, but I'm not sure. I'll let Chairman Charnell, if you'd like to answer.
Play during school hours.
By the way, I might be able to spare you. Councilor Nacrasto just handed me Section 11-143 of our ordinances, which says no persons enrolled in elementary or secondary school shall be allowed to play the machines during normal operational hours of school.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's a rule.
That's, apparently that's a moot issue.
Yeah. So I mean, we have had establishments asking for more amusement devices, and it's per machine. So, like, again, when you go into Westgate Lanes, all the lanes are charged individually. So, you know, it is a revenue-generating thing for the city, so I don't think it's a real bad thing to increase it. 60 is really, really low, you know, especially if we have larger businesses that want to come into the city. They're going to be, you know, they might go to another town, which probably happens once they read our ordinance.
Councilors, anything?
Yes.
Councilor DeCastro.
Good evening. Thank you for being here. So this proposed ordinance increases the number of amusement devices from 60 to 100. In the city of Brockton, in businesses that do not hold alcohol beverage licenses, but Westgate Lane does have an alcoholic beverage license.
They do, yes.
It says it's for businesses that don't have an alcohol license or a common victualer's license.
And they have both, so.
So I'm not, does this apply, Attorney Resnick?
I am not sure. I was asked to draft this, and this is what I did. I don't know anything about this subject applicant.
Okay.
I mean, the goal was just to increase the video games. I don't know why it was such a low number. I mean, it's been years, I believe, since this was first written. And we do have other businesses that are going to be opening soon. I know there's a business that's going in at the old Dick's Sporting Goods that's going to be mainly, for kids, arcades, video games. So I don't want to see them be restricted to the number of games. I'm not sure. Westgate Lanes has always had an alcohol license, a liquor license, and, they've had restaurant seating. So I'm not sure, maybe, do we need to relook at it, change it?
I think that it probably should just be,
Video?
it should be they should be included in because they have, most of these establishments that
Have a liquor
have
license.
games have some
Yeah.
type of license or common victual.
I think we need to look into that and compare it to the current ordinance. Current ordinance was written in 1983, when certainly the population was much lower, right? So,
Yeah, I've heard some stories about why it was 60 and such, and I think it was
Yeah.
Good Times or some business coming into the city, and
yes.
it was going to be on a certain side of town, and
But that was in the 90s.
yeah, so I've heard, again, who knows what's,
So if this is what you're looking to do, it's a different section in the statute. I believe I asked you about this, so we would have this information, but it's 35 for businesses that have the,
Licenses.
the other licenses. And it's 60 if you don't.
yeah.
Now, you could just do across the board if you don't really care about whether or not they have alcoholic licenses or not. You can change both of those to whatever number you want, but it's a different reference. Just so you're aware.
Go ahead.
Councilor Lally?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What would we have to, can we do that today?
Sure.
Just say, the request is, the request was for a location with, these licenses. And I am comfortable honoring that request, but I don't see why at this point we differentiate. If we can just put it across the board today, I think that's a reasonable thing to do.
I'd be interested to know, why is there a difference?
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
Probably something similar to why they
Historically.
made it 60 in the past.
Back to
One of those creative, lost to time bits of legislation.
Yeah, someone will know.
I think it had to do with the machines at the time.
Well, just.
Yeah,
just
the
as a-
80s is not
Just as
the
a
not the
point-
games of today.
Just as a point of information for all you youngsters, back in 1983, the video games weren't quite as prolific or as well done as they are today. So it's, you may barely remember that, Mr. Charnel. We didn't have the video games in 83 that we
Doesn't
have
remember
now.
it at all.
Mr.
Wasn't
Chairman,
around yet in 80s.
Mr. Chairman, is it true you were the city's Pong champion for a while?
Actually, this came up because, and I was on the school committee at the time, and there was a hue and cry that we were going to corrupt the morals and values of school children with video games in the city, and I don't even want to relive some of the foolishness that went on, so, but anyway.
And now they carry them in their pockets.
Now it's right on here, and we can even gamble if we want to, so.
We can make this really simple. It is this section. It's just a different paragraph from that section. And if you're looking to just do, regardless of whether or not you have an alcohol license or not, you just want to say it's a 200 cap. This is what your license would read, and I can create the amendment, but it would say that amusement or entertainment businesses, an establishment which does have a business activity, amusement, or entertainment, shall be allowed a maximum of 100 or 200 amusement licenses. It's just cutting out all of those differentiations between if you also have an alcohol license. Simple enough to accomplish.
Councilor Lally?
And also, irrespective, this one also applies to the square footage. So this one says if you have a certain amount of square feet, you can go up, but
So would we
Yeah.
be making a motion to amend to what you said, and would we have to strike one of the two paragraphs?
Yeah, it would just be to,
Like, this is section 11-144.
and it's still on C.
Yeah.
We'll have to
Um,
go before.
so it would be,
Counselors, and is there possible to have in there that they still have to go before the License Commission, so it would still come under the approval of the License Commission, that if, I mean, we also don't want anybody to be able to violate, just say, oh, we can have 200 machines, so leave it to the discretion of the License Commission?
Can we just, we can put a sentence at the bottom, per approval or by approval of the License
License
Commission?
Commission.
well,
Yeah,
that's,
we
this
don't
whole
wanna cut the
section is
commission
that
out.
you have to have a license to operate them.
Oh,
So
well, yeah,
that
that would-
assumes that you have to go before License Commission. But you can use language up to 200, and that could indicate,
100.
We're already at, so this is where it's gotten kind of, Westgate Lanes is already at approximately, I think they're at 60 or 70 now, but with their expansion,
surpass 100.
they will surpass 100.
They want to go past 100?
Yeah.
They will, yeah.
Okay.
What you're proposing says 100.
Right, what we discussed with Sylvia today, and I think they
So
don't want to be limited in case they.
So I think when the counselor was working with the Westgate Lanes, 100 was, they were at like 80, and they were looking to go to 100, but they even said, they're looking at other machines, maybe smaller, slimmer things, so you don't know what machines they plan on, so just giving them a little bit of a range, so just in case they go to 120 or 130, they're not violating any, statute. I think that's.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate we're trying to be business-friendly, but is the tail wagging the dog here?
Well, no, I think what's happening also is the times, they're just keeping up with what's, they're expanding, they're upgrading, they're becoming, updated. We've always asked to have something for our youth and our teenagers in the city, and they're really stepping it up. They're investing a lot of money in there, so I don't want to restrict them. And just keep in mind that the city also gets money per license, per machine. So, it's not like we're giving anything away. They're going to be paying for the number of machines they have there. They have to hold a license for each machine, and they're regularly inspected. I mean, the inspectors are in there regularly, the police department, the license, the police officers that are in the license commission are in there regularly. They're there all the time.
What I would add is, when we approve these, we get scaled plans of where the machines are going to be, and then, are they going to be plugged in via the right HERS ratings and stuff like that. So it's not like we're just going to allow folks to go in there, plop a bunch of machines, and it be unsafe. No, we get plans, we know that we're going to be, and again, we send, either Deputy Chief Williams or the lieutenant out to make sure that, they're in the spaces that they say, and again, they check the plugs to make sure that, the place is not going to burn down either. So, the commission is very aware of, not allowing, unsafe places, and 500 square feet have 200 machines everywhere, that's, we wouldn't allow that. If it's very small, we're going to be like, hey, you only can fit so many machines in here. So I think that, under the purview of the commission, we would be able to make those distinctions.
Are the police called to Westgate Lanes very often?
As far as I know, I haven't had any interactions with, the former owners or the current owners.
Anyone else? We know where we are? I do. Go
City
ahead.
Hall, I think.
Councilor Texera?
Yeah, per discussion, I think it should be up to the License Commission to bring that up and see if 200 or 150, whatever the number, it should be up to the License Commission to,
But we would set the ceiling.
we'll set the ceiling at 200, then the License Commission will determine.
And that's what we're asking for, exactly. So we're just changing the ordinance and then leaving it up to the License Commission,
license.
giving them leeway, so we're not restricting businesses with a number that, they can't work with.
Special, Westgate Lane has been around for God knows.
They've been around, and the new owners are really investing a lot of money. They're
Yeah,
putting in,
so-
they were before the city council not too long ago, a few months ago, the new owner, and they mentioned the money that they're investing. They're putting in new laser tag. There's even some kind of like a virtual movie, like, they're doing all kinds of great things, and this will be a great place for our youth to go, so.
What kind of limitations does Boston impose? Or does Boston impose any limitations? Are you familiar?
No, Counselor, I'm not familiar with.
Through the chair?
Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, but through the chair, they just opened a new arcade in the Seaport. It is a bar and a
Racing.
minimum 50 full-size, in-depth racing simulators for Formula One. So, and it's in a very compact, small area. So, pound for pound, foot per foot, if they have any kind of limiter, it's well beyond what is being discussed right now. I just wanted
Are you talking from experience, or you've been researching?
a good counselor scouts economic development
I'm glad to
opportunities,
hear that.
Wherever he goes.
sources of influence.
Councilors, this is pretty consistent with what the License Commission does. If someone wants to expand their premises, they go before the License Commission, there's a floor plan put in. If they want to change managers, we approve that. So I think I'm comfortable with 200 as long as I know the License Commission will be overseeing any proposal to go to a particular number. And even though we're talking about Westgate Lanes, this could apply to any vendor, so this isn't special legislation for them, this isn't a special consideration. I think it's a reflection that we want Brockton to try to be business-friendly and hopefully provide entertainment for people.
Exactly, so that's, as I mentioned earlier, there is a place that's going in right at the old Dick's Sporting Goods, so we don't want to restrict them. I mean, it's a new state-of-the-art type of entertainment for kids. I don't have the details on it. I've only heard through the grapevine, but I know that they've been working there and they're renovating to open up there, so we don't want to limit them as well, so.
Madam Clerk, could you read what the section should, how it
Okay.
should appear?
So if we are to do it based off of what I've heard from your feedback, you're going to strike in the existing ordinance, sections A and B. And just so you know, those ones distinguish between whether or not you have an alcohol license or not, and if your business is not primarily entertainment purposes. And what you would insert is amusement or entertainment business, an establishment which has as its principal business activity amusement or entertainment shall be allowed up to 200 automatic amusement devices. And what remains in this section is that no other establishment will be allowed more than 5 automatic amusement devices, which that applies if you're operating like a restaurant and it's not your primary business. That's already in your ordinance, so that part would stay so that your other businesses aren't impacted.
Okay, may I speak?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So we're going from a maximum of 60 to 200. So we're more than tripling the number. And it just seems like a lot to me. I think you could find me somewhere between 100 and 200, but 200 seems like a lot to me.
Councilor Allen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd say that I would rather, I think it was mentioned a couple minutes ago, I would rather, instead of 200, leave it to the commission's discretion. If that makes sense. I think that 60 is, or in actually the applicable law, because they, sell alcohol, is 35 right now.
That's right.
Pretty different than when it was put in the 80s.
That's right.
The phone in my pocket has more computing power than we used to land on the moon. So I know we didn't do that in the 80s, but Still, it's not that far off in terms of a jump. The understanding of video games is different. The use when it comes to a business like this, how they utilize them, similar, but it's not the same. I think that 35 and 60 respectively were overreactions and protectionist, and I don't think they were necessarily reasonable even for the time they were implemented. I don't think that, especially when we're attempting to open ourselves up to be a place that things happen here. People want to come here. Right now, we're a pretty big bedroom community. Avoiding that reputation and building something different requires empowering businesses to make, ambitious decisions. It requires empowering commissions like the License Commission to, vet and support those attempts. I don't think, if the request is for 200, I wouldn't want to go below that, and I would seriously want to examine leaving it to the discretion of the commission. You could get 200 games on a computer in your house. Different setting, different games, but I just think that this kind of a cap, as Mr. Chairman alluded to earlier, it was back in the days of, my child played a video game and now they have, ADHD and that kind of stuff. And we've seen, not to go too far off, but, sociologists have documented the advent of TV, comic books, radio, and even, novels hundreds of years ago. Children would get in trouble for committing a crime, and they would have a particularly crafty lawyer blaming the influence of that media on that child. So, you're looking at rules that were put in the 80s when people thought video games are going to rewire everybody's heads. I wouldn't support anything less than the 200 being requested, but I would prefer that we leave it to the commission. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So just to comment on that, the 200, the number came from the License Commission, and it didn't come from the businesses. That was the number that was given to me after a discussion with the clerk of the License Commission, and we discussed it with the chairman. And this just is to give them leeway. This doesn't mean that a business is automatically going to get 200 licenses, but if they apply and the commission feels that they can hold that many licenses, then they will. But it's not automatic. It's just
It's a ceiling.
Yes. So this isn't. It's just this number came from the commission, not the businesses.
And what did you base it on, Mr. Charnell?
The base is really giving the commission flexibility for businesses because, talking to Sylvia, we've had other interests and other businesses that have come here. I guess they've heard about, the restriction in the automatic amusement machines, like 60 or 35. I didn't even know the ones with alcohol were 35, to be very honest. And, I'm not saying that it led to anything or it led to, and again, I'm not even sure if I was around when some of that stuff happened, but it's really, again, like I said before, we get plans for everything. There's load restrictions in buildings. I mean, there's, the fire department goes out and checks these things. We had a situation with the property and the one that's half in West Bridgewater and half in Brockton on the south side of the city.
Trampoline park.
Yeah, the trampoline park, and they have automatic amusement devices. Some of them weren't wired correctly. Some of them didn't have the right plugs. Some of them were in West Bridgewater, so they said they didn't have to pay. So again, the commission said, no, you have to pay for all the machines. The fire department's going to inspect them. We got the layout of where they were. So again, I think the commission and the commissioners are very diligent. And again, I think, the premise of what what we do is safety. So we're not going to let a place be unsafe. So again, I just think that, places like the Westgate Lanes, I mean, say if they revamp the whole thing, they dump $4 million into the building and they want to add, 30, 40 machines. Some of these machines are relatively small, unique in size, but it's a machine. Some of them can stand on a counter. So again, but that's a machine. If we think of like these big podium style things, but not all of them are like that. So I just think it gives the business a little bit of a flexibility. And again, I think, the rest of the commission will do their due diligence to make sure that, the public's safe walking into that building, which is what we all strive for.
I'm not an expert in these things by any means. Would you say that on average 2 people play per machine?
So I think there's individual player machines, and then there's most of the machines are probably, dual player.
Dual players, yeah.
Multiplayer
Yeah.
machines like I love when I go to the fast car place and I play the basketball, the tic-tac-toe basketball, But I've been to places in Chicago, even city, Putt Shack and stuff like that.
Dave and Buster's.
Dave and Buster's, like for example, like Counselor, you bring that up, Dave and Buster's. If they came here to the city and wanted to put a facility here, that would be probably like 300 machines. And again, it's not that it's just everything counts as a machine in the city. Like this, that, this. We count it all because they're entertaining the people. So, it in the blind eye, it may not seem like a machine, but it probably is something that is what's.
And it's really driven by square footage. Who has enough, who has
Yeah, I would.
Space.
Yeah, I would make the judgment that, the commissioners would not allow, like I said, in a 500 square foot space, 200 machines. I mean, I think that's probably ridiculous, So if someone came with that plan, obviously they would be, not granted their license, because again, we are the body that would allow them to do that, And I don't think any of our commissioners would allow someone to do something like that. So I think that, we do our due diligence. We have the fire safety. We have the lieutenants that go out with their licensed agents. And we have the building department that, gives us the occupancy load. So again, we have a lot of parties involved to make sure that the place is safe and the square footage makes sense and is accessible so people can, move and be safe.
And the licenses are annual, correct?
Yeah, so they're renewed annually as well. So we get the fee every year. So Westgate Lanes pays a lot of money every year for, to use the machines, because maybe one year, maybe they'll take some away, maybe they'll add some on, maybe it didn't work, so many things like that. So
How did we find out that they had more than the maximum?
told us.
They told us, okay.
Yeah, so they were very upfront and honest, and they told us. And
Our inspectors didn't notice?
so I don't think it's the inspectors. Again, I wasn't aware of the automatic amusement devices being at 35 I wasn't aware of that. So I don't think that was a common thing. I just think that, over time, these businesses, add something here, add something there, add something here, add something there, and again, someone like me, I go into Westgate Lanes, I don't think I'm going to be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I'm not doing that. So, I just think, they've been renovating, they've been trying to dump money in, and, they're appeasing the public. The public wants it, so they're bringing it, but yet 35 is really, really small amount, so. But they were honest, and they let us know, and, that's why the counselor came with this.
Sure. Thank you.
All right, can we read what the motion should be again, for the record, Madam Clerk?
Yep, so you're going to strike in section 11-144, sections A and B, and insert in place of section C, the following language: amusement or entertainment business, an establishment which has as its principal business activity amusement or entertainment shall be allowed up to 200 automatic amusement devices.
So moved to amend.
Been a motion made and
Second.
seconded. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor? All those opposed? It is a vote.
Motion to recommend favorably as amended.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion made and properly seconded to recommend favorably as amended. All those in favor? All those opposed? It is a vote. Councilors, I do not believe we have any further business, so is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made to adjourn, properly seconded. All in favor? All opposed? We are adjourned.
Thank you.